Everything in the universe has a rhythm, everything dances. Maya Angelou. There is something hidden inside those words that most people spend years trying to understand. They believe life changes through struggle. They believe blessings arrive only after endless effort. They believe they must push harder, force circumstances, convince the world, and somehow overpower reality through exhaustion. Yet, what if the greatest transformations are not born from force, but from harmony? What if your life responds not to how hard you work emotionally, but to the frequency you consistently occupy? What if your consciousness functions much like a radio, receiving and transmitting according to what it is tuned to? Sit with that thought for a moment. Imagine an old radio sitting in a quiet room. The station already exists. The music is already being broadcast. The radio does not create the signal. It simply aligns itself with what is already there. If it is tuned to one frequency, it hears one song. Turn the dial, and suddenly an entirely different experience fills the room. The music was always present. The radio merely became receptive to it. Your life operates in much the same way. Many people spend years trying to make wealth, come while internally rehearsing poverty. They seek love while carrying the identity of abandonment. They pray for peace while entertaining thoughts of chaos every hour of the day. They ask why nothing changes, unaware that they are attempting to receive one station while remaining tuned to another. It is not because they are bad. It is not because they are unlucky. It is simply because consciousness faithfully reflects whatever frequency becomes familiar. Perhaps this is why effort alone leaves so many people exhausted. They are rowing against the current while their inner world is sending contradictory instructions. Outwardly they say, I want abundance. Yet inwardly they feel, nothing ever works for me. Outwardly they speak of happiness, but secretly they expect disappointment. And life, being perfectly obedient to the dominant assumption, continues to echo what they have accepted as true. Think about the times when something wonderful happened unexpectedly. Have you noticed that often it arrived when you stopped obsessing, when you relaxed, when you no longer felt desperate? It wasn't because you gave up. It was because you stopped broadcasting resistance. You unknowingly shifted your frequency. You became available to receive. This truth is deeply liberating because it means you do not have to wrestle with life every day. You do not have to wake up and convince the universe with endless rituals. You do not have to force opportunities to recognize your worth. You do not have to chase every blessing. The deeper work is not found in chasing. It is found in becoming. A seed never strains to become a tree. It carries within itself the blueprint. It simply follows its nature. Likewise, your future already contains possibilities waiting to express themselves, but they respond to the state you occupy now. Your identity becomes the tuning mechanism. Your assumptions become the dial. This is why thoughts repeated with feeling carry such power. Not because thoughts are magic words, but because repeated thoughts become beliefs, beliefs become identity, and identity becomes frequency. Eventually, you no longer hope for something. You expect it, and expectation changes everything. Consider two people walking into the same room. One expects rejection, the other expects respect. They may wear the same clothes and speak the same language, yet their experiences often differ dramatically. Why? Because expectations shape perception, and perception influences behavior. People unconsciously communicate what they believe about themselves, and the world responds accordingly. Life mirrors the inner broadcast. Most people underestimate how much time they spend listening to frequencies they never intentionally chose. They tune into fear through constant worry. They tune into limitation through comparison. They tune into lack through endless focus on what is missing. Then they wonder why they feel disconnected from joy. Imagine spending years listening to static and forgetting that music even exists. You might conclude that silence and noise are all there is. But the moment someone shows you that a slight adjustment of the dial changes everything, hope returns. Not because something new was created, but because something that always existed became accessible. The same applies to peace. Peace is not something you manufacture through struggle. It is a frequency. Love is a frequency. Confidence is a frequency. Gratitude is a frequency. Prosperity is a frequency. and frequencies are cultivated through repeated attention. This does not mean pretending problems do not exist. It does not mean denying reality. It means recognizing that your current conditions are not necessarily your permanent identity. The weather changes, seasons shift, frequencies move. A person who once lived in fear can become courageous. Someone who experienced loss can become deeply fulfilled. Someone who felt invisible can become radiant with self-respect. Transformation begins the moment you stop defining yourself by the station you have been hearing and start choosing the station you desire to experience. And perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is believing that changing frequency requires enormous effort. In truth, force often creates resistance. A radio does not scream at the signal, it simply aligns. Likewise, your mind becomes powerful when it stops fighting and starts accepting a higher assumption as natural. The secret is not to ask endlessly, how can I make it happen? The wiser question becomes, who am I being while I wait? Because the person who already feels worthy moves differently. The person who already expects goodness thinks differently. The person who already trusts life carries a different atmosphere. And that atmosphere, invisible though it may be, begins rearranging experiences in ways the logical mind cannot fully predict. Little by little, circumstances start reflecting the song you have chosen to hear. But before that outer melody becomes obvious, there is something even more important that must be understood about why so many people unknowingly keep returning to old frequencies, even after they have tasted the possibility of a new one. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Eleanor Roosevelt. And this is where many people become confused, because they experience moments when they feel elevated, hopeful, and deeply connected to a new vision of themselves, only to find that a few days later they are once again drowning in old fears, old doubts, and familiar emotions. They wonder what went wrong. They assume they failed. They conclude that perhaps they are not capable of changing. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. What they are experiencing is not failure. They are experiencing the pull of a frequency that has been practiced for years. You must understand something with great compassion toward yourself. Human beings are creatures of familiarity. The mind seeks what is known, even when what is known is painful. An old frequency may be uncomfortable, but if it has become familiar, the mind treats it as home. This is why people often return to worry after moments of peace. It is why someone who desires abundance can still feel strangely attached to scarcity. It is why a person who longs for love can unconsciously cling to loneliness. Familiarity creates comfort, and comfort creates repetition. But awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize this pattern, you stop condemning yourself for returning to old thoughts. Instead, you begin observing them with wisdom. You realize that thoughts are visitors, not masters. Feelings are movements, not identities. You stop saying, "This is who I am," and begin saying, "This is simply a station I have listened to for a long time." That small shift is powerful beyond measure. Imagine a traveler who has lived in darkness for many years. If someone suddenly opens the curtains and floods the room with sunlight, his eyes may struggle to adjust. The light itself is not painful. It is simply unfamiliar. In the same way, new assumptions often feel unnatural at first. Confidence may feel strange. Prosperity may feel distant. Peace may seem almost uncomfortable. Not because they are wrong, but because they are new. Most people abandon their new frequency because they expect immediate emotional perfection. They believe they should never feel doubt again. They think fear must disappear completely before they can trust themselves. But growth has never required perfection. A radio occasionally experiences interference, yet the signal remains. Clouds may cover the sun, but the sun itself has not vanished. Likewise, temporary emotions cannot destroy a truth you consistently return to. The key is gentle persistence, not force. Not obsession, not exhausting yourself with endless mental battles. Gentle persistence. Think of water flowing over stone. Water does not attack the rock. It simply continues. Day after day, season after season, it shapes what once seemed immovable. Your repeated assumptions work in the same way. Every time you return to a higher frequency, even after moments of doubt, you are reshaping the inner landscape of your consciousness. This is why inner conversations matter so deeply. People often underestimate the silent words they speak to themselves throughout the day. They may smile outwardly while inwardly repeating sentences that imprison them. I'm always behind. Life is difficult. People leave. Success belongs to others. These quiet statements become unconscious broadcasts. Over time, they create emotional environments that feel normal. But imagine if those conversations began to change. Imagine waking up and quietly recognizing something beautiful is unfolding for me. Imagine facing uncertainty and whispering, I am supported. Imagine looking at your dreams and saying, they belong to me. Not because evidence has appeared, but because you are choosing your frequency before circumstances demand it. That is real mastery. Anyone can believe after results appear. Anyone can celebrate after the miracle arrives. But consciousness grows powerful when it learns to remain faithful before visible proof emerges. The farmer does not dig up the seed every morning to see if roots have formed. He understands that unseen growth is still growth. He trusts the process because nature itself operates in hidden ways. Your life also contains invisible movements. Conversations are taking place that you cannot hear. Doors are being prepared that you cannot yet see. Ideas are forming within you before you fully understand them. People are entering your path before you know their names. What appears delayed may actually be developing. And perhaps this is why impatience becomes such a thief. Impatience assumes that absence means nothing is happening. But life has never revealed all its workings at once. Mountains are formed slowly. Oceans shape coastlines over centuries. Stars are born in silence. The most magnificent creations often emerge from invisible preparation. There is a sacred peace that enters the heart when you stop measuring progress by appearances alone. You begin understanding that circumstances are echoes. They are reflections of frequencies that have already been entertained within consciousness. Instead of reacting to every temporary condition, you become rooted in something deeper. You stop asking, why hasn't it happened yet? And begin asking, am I remaining loyal to the person I have chosen to become? Because that person already carries a different atmosphere. That person no longer seeks validation from every opinion. That person no longer interprets every delay as rejection. That person understands that identity precedes experience. And as identity changes, life begins rearranging itself with remarkable precision. Yet there is another mystery that most people overlook completely. It is the reason two individuals can hear the same teachings, repeat the same affirmations, and yet experience entirely different results. The difference is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is not effort. It is something much deeper, something hidden beneath words themselves. And once you understand this, you will never approach your assumptions in the same way again. Man is made by his belief. As he believes, so he is. Bhagavad Gita. And this deeper mystery begins with a truth that many overlook because it is so simple. Words themselves are not the frequency. Techniques are not the frequency. Repetition alone is not the frequency. What truly broadcasts into life is the meaning you attach to what you say and the identity from which you say it. Two people can speak the exact same sentence, yet one speaks from certainty and the other speaks from desperation. Outwardly, the words are identical, but inwardly, they are transmitting entirely different signals. This is why some people spend years trying to force positive thoughts while secretly fearing disappointment. They repeat beautiful phrases while emotionally preparing for failure. They say they trust life, yet they expect betrayal. They declare abundance, yet they feel unworthy of receiving. Their lips speak one language, but their consciousness speaks another. And consciousness always speaks louder. You see, life is listening less to your words and more to your assumptions. It responds to what feels natural to you. It mirrors what you quietly accept as possible. And what feels natural has been shaped not only by thoughts, but by memories, emotions, interpretations, and stories repeated so often that they became invisible. Perhaps somewhere along the journey, you accepted ideas that were never truly yours. Maybe you inherited fears from people who themselves lived in fear. Maybe you absorbed beliefs from disappointment and called them wisdom. Maybe painful experiences convinced you that you had to struggle for everything. Perhaps you learn to expect loss before joy, rejection before acceptance, and scarcity before abundance. But a painful history does not have the authority to define a limitless future. The experiences behind you may explain certain fears, but they do not possess the power to imprison your destiny unless you continue giving them permission. You are not required to remain loyal to old versions of yourself simply because they have been familiar. You are allowed to outgrow identities that no longer serve the person you are becoming. And this transformation begins with something sacred that most people neglect: stillness. Not inactivity, not withdrawal, stillness. Because when the mind becomes quiet, you begin hearing something deeper than fear. Beneath all the noise, beneath all the rushing and overthinking, there is a silent awareness that has always been present. A calm center untouched by temporary circumstances. A place within you that does not panic when delays appear. A place that does not define itself by appearances. A place that remembers who you truly are. Have you noticed how often the world trains people to react? React to bad news, react to criticism, react to uncertainty, react to appearances, react to every passing emotion. Yet reaction keeps consciousness chained to external conditions. A person who constantly reacts becomes like a leaf carried by the wind. But the one who learns inner stillness becomes like the roots beneath the tree. Storms may come, but something deeper remains grounded. This is why inner peace is not weakness. It is strength. It is power without force. It is confidence without arrogance. It is trust without anxiety. And from that place, assumptions become effortless. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you stop depending on circumstances to tell you who you are. You understand that conditions change, but identity directs conditions. You no longer wait for success to feel valuable. You no longer wait for love to feel lovable. You no longer wait for wealth to feel abundant. You begin carrying those qualities within, and life gradually reflects them outwardly. Think about the sun for a moment. It shines regardless of who appreciates it. It does not negotiate with clouds. It does not stop radiating because the sky temporarily becomes dark. Its nature is to shine. Imagine living like that. Imagine no longer making your peace dependent upon daily circumstances. Imagine refusing to surrender your confidence to temporary setbacks. Imagine choosing gratitude while still moving toward greater things. Imagine becoming so deeply rooted in your assumptions that external events lose their power to shake your foundation. This is not fantasy. This is inner maturity, and something extraordinary begins to happen when a person reaches this state. They become magnetic without trying. Opportunities appear naturally. Relationships shift, ideas emerge. Unexpected blessings find openings where resistance once stood. Not because they manipulated reality, but because they became aligned with a different frequency. People around them may wonder what changed. They may ask, "What are you doing differently?" But the answer is rarely dramatic. They simply stopped fighting life. They stopped worshipping appearances. They stopped making fear their home. They stopped asking circumstances for permission to believe in themselves. And perhaps most importantly, they stopped treating their dreams like distant possibilities and started embracing them as inevitable expressions of who they are. Because inevitability carries a completely different energy from wishing. Wishing says, "I hope." Frequency says, "I know." Wishing asks for permission. Frequency expects. Wishing looks outward. Frequency lives inward. And when that inner knowing becomes stable, something beautiful occurs. You begin experiencing life less as a battle and more as a relationship. You stop trying to conquer existence and start cooperating with it. You discover that the universe does not respond to panic. It responds to alignment. But there is one final truth, perhaps the most powerful truth of all, because it explains why some transformations happen suddenly after years of waiting, why certain moments change everything forever, and why the person you become matters infinitely more than anything you acquire. And once you truly understand this final principle, you will never again confuse effort with frequency. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford. And perhaps those words have endured through generations because they point toward something far greater than positive thinking. They reveal a principle that quietly shapes every human experience. Life does not merely respond to wishes. It responds to identity. And identity itself is nothing more than a frequency sustained long enough to become natural. This is why some transformations appear sudden to the outside world. People call them miracles. They call them luck. They wonder what secret formula was discovered overnight. Yet what they cannot see are the invisible seasons that came before. They do not see the countless moments when a person chose faith over fear. They do not see the quiet decisions, the silent assumptions, the inner conversations that slowly shifted the entire atmosphere of consciousness. Then one day, what was cultivated in silence becomes visible. And the world says, everything changed so quickly, but nothing changed quickly. The fruit simply became visible. A tree does not apologize for producing apples. It does not struggle to convince the branches to bear fruit. It expresses what it is. In the same way, your outer life continuously expresses your inner atmosphere. And the beautiful truth hidden within this understanding is that you were never meant to spend your life chasing experiences. You were meant to become the kind of person for whom those experiences are natural. So many people spend their years saying, when I have more money, then I will feel secure. When I find love, then I will feel complete. When success arrives, then I will finally relax. But this approach turns life upside down. Because security is a frequency. Love is a frequency. Peace is a frequency. Wholeness is a frequency. And frequencies are not rewards waiting at the end of the journey. They are states you choose along the way. Think of a musician holding a tuning fork. Before the orchestra performs, every instrument must align. If even one instrument is out of tune, the music suffers. Yet no amount of effort can replace alignment. The violin does not try harder, it tunes itself. Perhaps that is what your soul has been asking for all along. Not more force, not more anxiety, not endless striving, but alignment. Perhaps you have spent years believing that your dreams are somewhere outside of you, waiting in distant circumstances. Yet what if they are waiting within you, asking you to become emotionally familiar with them? What if abundance has been waiting for you to stop identifying with lack? What if peace has been waiting for you to stop rehearsing chaos? What if love has been waiting for you to stop believing that you are separate from it? You see, a radio does not beg for music, it receives. And receiving requires openness. Receiving requires trust. Receiving requires a willingness to stop clinging to old signals. Imagine carrying this understanding into every area of your life. Imagine waking up each morning and asking yourself, what frequency am I choosing today? Not, what problems might appear, not, what if things go wrong, but, who am I deciding to be? Because that question changes everything. The person who chooses gratitude experiences life differently. The person who chooses peace thinks differently. The person who chooses confidence walks differently. And eventually, that person lives differently. Not because they controlled every circumstance, but because they stopped allowing circumstances to control them. There will still be moments when doubt visits. There will still be days when appearances seem stubborn. There will still be seasons when progress feels invisible. But remember this, clouds have never possessed the power to extinguish the sun. Temporary emotions cannot cancel eternal truths. Delays are not denials. Silence is not abandonment. An unseen movement is still movement. Do not become discouraged by what your eyes cannot yet measure. The roots beneath the earth are growing even when the surface appears unchanged. The dawn is approaching even while the night seems long. And the person you are becoming matters infinitely more than the things you are pursuing. Because possessions can be lost, circumstances can change, people can come and go, but consciousness remains the source from which all experiences flow. Protect it, nourish it, guide it gently. Speak to yourself with wisdom. Refuse to make fear your identity. Refuse to worship temporary appearances. Refuse to define yourself by yesterday's limitations. You are not here merely to survive another day. You are here to awaken to the power that has quietly existed within you all along. You are here to understand that life is less like a battlefield and more like a mirror. You are here to discover that what you consistently assume becomes the atmosphere through which you experience existence. And you are here to remember that effort alone does not change the station. Frequency does. So stop exhausting yourself trying to force the music. Stop believing that struggle is the price of every blessing. Stop acting as though your dreams are far away. Become still enough to hear the signal. Become wise enough to choose it. Become faithful enough to remain with it. And little by little, day by day, what once seemed impossible will begin to feel natural. Not because you chased it, not because you fought for it, but because you became the person who could finally receive it. For in the end, life is not asking you to strain harder. Life is asking you to tune differently. And when your frequency changes, the song you call reality begins to change with it. And perhaps that has been the secret all along.